Another one of God's generals in the charismatic movement is a guy named John G. Lake. He was a disciple of John Alexander Dowie. He founded the church at Portland, Oregon, and he also had healing rooms. Charismatics today claim that John G. Lake was probably the most prolific faith healer of all of the charismatic faith healers. They claim that 100,000 people were healed at the hands of John G. Lake. None of these, however, have been documented. They're just, charismatics just say, oh yeah, 100,000 people were healed by John G. Lake. There's no proof of it. The only kind of healings that you saw with John G. Lake are the same kind of healings that you see today in the charismatic movement. They're psychosomatic healings, mind over body. And there's a number of conditions that people can suffer from, and they can get temporary relief from just by a rush of adrenaline, rush of endorphins. When you're in a closed environment with a lot of people and there's emotionally charged music and maybe the lights are dimmed and people are expecting something to happen, you can convince yourself that you feel better. And you know what? You actually do feel better for a little while until the euphoria subsides, a new day dawns, and the symptoms always reappear. Those are psychosomatic healings. Those happen all the time in the charismatic movement. What you do not see in the charismatic movement are organic healings. A healing that cannot be explained simply by a temporary rush of adrenaline or endorphins. For example, I have cerebral palsy. And if I were to get on my crutches and stand up on the stage, no matter how good of a mood I'm in, no matter how happy I might get, if you take my crutches away from me, boom, down goes Fraser. So a healing like of something like what I've got, that would be an organic healing. An amputee growing a new limb, that would be an organic healing. You never see those kind of healings in the charismatic movement, ever. Psychosomatic healings, all the time. All the time. Newspaper articles of his day roundly debunked his claims. His own wife died of a fever 6 months after they arrived on a boat in South Africa in 1908. And so he claimed to heal 100,000 other people, but he couldn't heal his own wife. And then he got engaged to another lady after his first wife died. And he got engaged to this woman, but she also died. She died of malaria just a year later in 1909. Interestingly, he only got engaged to this other woman after he supposedly got permission from his late wife through a seance. He talked to dead people. So, the Bible condemns that kind of practice. He faced criminal charges, was arrested for security and stock fraud in Portland, Oregon. He was a scoundrel too. He was an absolute scoundrel. Let's see, for time's sake, I'm going to skip some of this. They're just snapshots of some of the newspaper articles that documented his fraudulent schemes, swindling people out of money. One of his schemes was called the Blue Sky Fraud. Another was stock bonus for tithes. He promised his followers money if they would give him, more money. Just a complete scoundrel and fraud. This is a picture of John G. Lake. On the left there, it's an old newspaper article, obviously, so it's the details but he's dressed up like an Arab mystic. He went around, he actually gave himself a name, Abdul bin Shinandar, and claimed to have these mystical powers because he was an Arab, and he's just dressing in, the equivalent of basically blackface. He just made himself look to be like an Arab, and when he wasn't an Arab, he's just a complete scoundrel and fraud. Complete fraud. But there are wild reports today of that charismatics promote to this very day. They're very proud of it. They say that John G. Lake, when he arrived in South Africa, and it is true that when he arrived in South Africa, that was at the time that the bubonic plague was running rampant and was killing a lot of people. And the charismatics claim that John G. Lake was absolutely impervious to the bubonic plague, so much so that he even challenged doctors to put some of the plague on his hand. And he said, if you do that, the bacteria will die. Watch this. This is a video clip making this claim of John G. Lake by Bill Johnson. Watch this.
Lake stayed in such constant communion with the Lord that it seemed not even a deadly plague could survive when coming into contact with him.
He once took, the fluids from a dead person's body filled with living bacteria. And the doctors, told him he's going to die, by touching this stuff. And he said, put this under a microscope. You'll notice it's dead. And it's because he was confident that the resurrectional life in him, flowing from him, was greater than any disease attaching itself to him. And they did. They subjected it to a microscope, and they saw he was exactly right. Everything died. The disease died when it touched him. You don't do that unless you know who you are, whose you are, and what he's commissioned you to do.
Okay, so Bill Johnson, pastor of Bethel Church, says that they took some of this plagues, actually foam, allegedly foam from one of the corpses of someone who had died with the bubonic plague, took some of the foam that was full of that plague, bacteria, put it on his hand, and the claim is that when they did so, the bacteria died. This claim is repeated by charismatics all the time today. Watch this from Andrew Womack as he makes the same claim about himself. Watch. Now, let me say this. The clip you're about to see came out in March of 2020. March of 2020. So that's when COVID, right, was getting really ramped up. Everybody was talking about COVID. And it's March of 2020 when he said this.
Because, see, there are some people like me who know that no plague is going to come nigh my dwelling. If a germ touches me, it's going to die. And I believe that 100%.
If a germ touches him, it's going to die. Well, he gets this from John G. Lake and the claims that are told about him. Now, it's interesting because back in the early 1900s, there were no electron microscopes, right? All we had were your basic light microscopes, like one of these. Many of you use this in, human phys or biology class or whatever in high school. Pretty basic piece of equipment here. Now, what would happen if you took, let's just say they did take some of the foam from one of these corpses and put it on the hands of John G. Lake, and then they say they put his hand under a microscope and they could see the bacteria die just by being in contact with his hand. Now, look at this microscope. A few basic parts, right? You've got the base. See that mirror right there? The mirror is positioned there to reflect the light. Light comes in, hits that mirror, and is reflected up, and it goes through the little lens there on the stage where the little clips are, and then goes up into the eyepiece, right? And then you look down and it magnifies. Now, I'm not a smart man, but just imagine a human hand on top of that little platform there, the stage with the clips. How's the light? How is the light going to get up from the mirror? It ain't passing through that human hand, I guarantee you that. It's just a lie. It's a lie. It never happened.